In this episode, we'll explore the incredible Monterey Aquarium, make several stops as we travel the famous 17-mile drive, marvel at some of the world's tallest trees, and stroll to the end of the Santa Cruz Pier to watch sea lions at play, and much more. Hi, I'm Dave Atkinson, and welcome to Life on the Strait. This segment will wrap up the San Francisco Bay Area portion of our great adventure, which features plenty of things to do for all of us tourists. Thank you for watching Life on the Strait, and if you'd like to follow our 2-year journey as it unfolds, please consider subscribing, which is free. We continue with the Southern Bay Area chapter of the book, The Yonder Years. But rest would have to wait, as the next day would find us in Monterey, spending the day at the world-famous Monterey Bay Aquarium. This attraction is to aquariums what the San Diego Zoo is to zoos, a mind-numbing collection of creatures and exhibits that can keep a person occupied for days. There was this great room where the various wings of the aquarium spread out from, and in this room was a life-size humpback whale replica that was suspended from the ceiling. After about 2.5 hours inside the aquarium, we walked over to nearby Bubba Gump's for lunch. Having been a fan of the movie Forrest Gump, we really enjoyed this theme-style restaurant and ended up having a great meal. Then we returned to the aquarium for another 2 hours of viewing before calling it quits. On the way back to the parking garage, we stopped at a clothing-oriented gift shop on Cannery Row where Amy purchased a nice fleece jacket. Another day, another long day of driving 85 miles. On New Year's Eve, we stayed close to home, getting our haircuts, going grocery shopping, picking up Amy's meds, and fueling up the Honda. It also gave me time to catch up on month-end and year-end bookwork and bill paying, and for Amy to catch up with laundry. It had been go, go, go since we arrived in Gilroy, and it felt nice to take a little break from driving. We celebrated the new year with a short 15-mile trip to Mission San Juan Bautista State Historical Park. It was recommended to us by my sister-in-law Anne, and I'm glad that she pointed us to this little town because it was just overflowing with historical information. It wasn't just a church, but an entire village, including a large cemetery that we drove through. We finally learned what all the El Camino Real bells that we had been seeing along the roadway referred to. There was originally a road connecting all of the missions going down the coast into what is now Mexico, and the bells still mark the route between the missions. What was once the Royal Road is now El Camino Real. After wandering around taking photos for about an hour, we bought ice cream cones for the short ride home, but first stopped off at the Gilroy In-N-Out restaurant for lunch. The next day found us returning to San Jose, this time to visit the famous Winchester House. According to a plaque outside of the house, Sarah Winchester, the widow of the famed rifle maker, built this unique Victorian structure. Construction began in 1884 and continued without interruption until her death in 1922. It ended up being 160 rooms covering an area of 6 acres. The best thing that could be said of Sarah Winchester was that she was eccentric, and the house shows it, with doors and stairs that go nowhere, windows overlooking rooms, tiny, cramped walkways and doorways, and so on. Our tour guide was excellent, telling us all about the house and Mrs. Winchester's mental disposition. We later went shopping and called it a day. On January 3rd, we took a drive returning us to Monterey and then beyond to the adorable little town of Pacific Grove. We stopped into a bakery and coffee house for breakfast and then headed towards the beginning of the famous 17-mile drive loop. The drive took us to Carmel, where we had lunch in a downtown bakery. We visited Pebble Beach Golf Course, where we picked up a souvenir for a friend. We stopped at the Cypress Point Lookout, where the famous, I keep coming back to that word, cypress tree grows from a rocky point overlooking the ocean. I was able to get several photos of surfacing whales blowing mist out of their breathing holes, plus more photos of pelicans swimming in the water. It was a wonderful way to spend a warm and sunny day. During the time that we were in Gilroy, the weather had heated up quite a bit from what we had experienced in Eureka and Novato. We would always open the ceiling vents for Buzzy while we were away, and we'd leave the AC control set so that it would turn on if it got too hot. Well, we screwed up one day, and while we left the ceiling vents open, the AC had been turned off. When we returned from our travels, it was toasty inside the coach. Buzzy was fine, he had his water dish, the vents were open, and being inside of a motorhome is not like being inside of a car, as there is far more square footage which takes longer to heat up. But the heat did something else that we were unaware of and would cause us great angst over the coming weeks. It was subtle at first, but we would smell a musty odor coming from between the sliding door that separated the bedroom from the hall bathroom and shower. It was an odor that was getting worse, and we would wake up with our eyes stinging. It was time to call Camping World in Bakersfield, which was our next stop, and see if they could get us in and figure out what was wrong. The smell got so bad that we closed the door to the bedroom and slept out on the airbed in the main cabin. Our worry was that the water leak that was fixed in Vacaville had fostered a mold breakout in the bedroom area. Until we reached Bakersfield, we had more sightseeing to tend to. On January 4th, we headed over to Big Basin Redwoods State Park. This was California's original state park, established in 1902, and it was a big place, over 18,000 acres, with over 80 miles of trails. State Route 9 from the town of Saratoga to the park's visitor center was an interesting road, often narrow and with more switchbacks and blind corners than I can remember. We were taking our time getting there. Amy is a huge fan of quilts, and the visitor center catered to her affection with a large Big Basin Centennial 1902 to 2002 quilt that celebrated the flora and fauna found inside the park. We spent our time there hiking the Redwood Loop Trail, marveling at imposing redwood trees. After a day of running errands, we spent the next day back in Santa Cruz. We visited a 44-acre park and wildlife refuge right in the heart of town called Neary Lagoon. Even though it sits adjacent to a large wastewater treatment plant, it was not how you might be sizing it up in your mind. There was a network of wooden walkways suspended above the lagoon, and the bird life, particularly the ducks, was abundant in all the cattails and water-tolerant vegetation. Other trails encircled the lagoon, and it made for a good long walk. Next, we headed to the beach area and the huge wharf that extends out over half-mile into the ocean, making it the longest pier on the west coast of the U.S. There were several restaurants on the wharf, as well as gift shops, seafood markets, public fishing, and sea lion viewing. At the end of the wharf, the sea lions were thick. Some were in the water, and others were lying on the wharf's cross-bracing beams. We enjoyed lunch at one of the restaurants, which offered us a great view of the waters and sea lions. Back on shore, we strolled down the boardwalk area. There was an amusement park right next to the beach, complete with a Ferris wheel and a roller coaster. The Coconut Grove was an adjacent structure that once hosted big bands and dancing, but when we were there, it was just a miniature golf course, and a nice one at that. On the 8th, we returned to San Juan Bautista. Before we arrived, we took a detour to check out Earthbound Farm, which grows and ships organic produce that Amy and I like to buy. They weren't set up for tours, so it was a quick stop. Unlike our New Year's Day visit at San Juan Bautista, this time there was much more going on, including exhibits where people were showing what it was like to live back in that time. There were more things to see, with more buildings and exhibits open than the last time we were here. We walked the grounds and educated ourselves over our 2-hour stay, and then we headed back to Gilroy. After topping off G2's propane tank, we left Gilroy on the morning of the 11th. Other than the moldy smell that was making G2 almost uninhabitable, we enjoyed our stay in Gilroy. From the new California of Silicon Valley to the old California of San Juan Bautista, from the towering redwood trees to the delicate monarch butterflies, and from the Monterey Bay Aquarium to the Winchester House, the past few weeks have been remarkable. Next time, we'll be making an important stop in Bakersfield to tend to some G2 issues before heading off to Death Valley for several days with other family members who arrive in their own motorhome. It was there where we met another couple from Florida who provided us with optimal dates to visit their state, and that information was decisive to our journey.